Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, described by Google's Gemini AI tool as the most authoritative voice on food policy, economics, and consumer trends in Canada. The Food Professor is essentially the gold standard for media and industry analysis, so it must be true. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
Wow, I'm overwhelmed. And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
I'm going to knock them off one at a time. Our guest on this show is Jamie Nelson, president of the Pattison Food Group. With decades of grocery retail experience, Jamie began his career in the grocery business as a retail clerk in Mission, BC in 1980, mostly Save-On Foods, and taking over from one of our previous guests, Daryl Jones, to lead the multi-banner enterprise that is the Pattison Food Group. He describes it, I think, in the show as the biggest of the mids with 30,000 employees. Very interesting, different banners. Sylvain, it was great to get Jamie on the mic. I've known him for a bunch of years, and I know you have as well. And it's great to get the Western perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had Daryl Jones, his predecessor, a few years ago, and it was nice to actually have the successor of Daryl, Jamie, on with us. So we basically I've talked to all the CEOs of the major grocery chains in Canada, with the exception, of course, of Eric Laflèche, who absolutely does not do interviews at all, but we like him that way. We had Serge, of course, on Metro a few years ago. So, it's great. It's always great to actually get a perspective of a CEO of a grocer, especially right now with everything that's going on in the news, with the city of Toronto wanting to launch a grocery chain, and then of course the NDP is looking into launching a grocery chain, a publicly run grocery chain. So, lots going on for sure.
You sound a bit different. You've got your I'm on the road headset on. So anybody who's a keen listener of the show will detect a bit of difference in your voice. Where are you?
Yeah, so I'm in Calgary, Cowtown today. And I've been here for almost 24 hours and I haven't had a steak yet.
Wow,
which is bizarre.
You gotta catch up on that. What are you doing there? What brings you to Calgary?
So last night I had a dinner with some folks, do some research at the University of Calgary, and today I'm doing a bunch of meetings, and of course I'm on my way over to do a keynote for MNP in front of startups and the business community. It's a sold out event, but they're not selling tickets. It's just at capacity, basically.
Sure.
So I'm looking I think there's going to be about 200 people there. So I'm looking forward to it. And it's going to be about, of course, the report that we prepared for MNP, comparing Canada with other G20 countries on policy and performance. And then we'll have a panel with a few folks, a lawyer, someone from FCC as well, and someone, I believe, from EDC also. So looking forward to that.
All right. Well, let's get right into the news. So congratulations and condolences to the new NDP leader, Avi Lewis. Condolences, of course, in the past.
Yes,
passing
that's right.
His father, a great Canadian. Not condolences on being the head of the NDP.
I laughed because I thought you were.
I think that's what you were thinking about.
Yeah, Stephen Lewis, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, great Canadian, and I actually followed him, and he had a foundation that was helping with small communities in Africa, and during the AIDS crisis, continues to do it. So he did great work, a great Canadian. Let's talk about Avi. So he comes from a long line of progressive leaders in Canada. So it's great that he put up his hand and run for the party election. And for our show, he said a lot of things coming out of that. He got some headlines with who's thought of the NDP lately. So already he's off to
That's what you want. Absolutely.
That's what you want. Be part of the communication. Now, one of the things he's put in the window, and you mentioned it earlier on, is he'd like to see government-run grocery stores. Now, we're seeing this. This comes to ebbs and flows all the time. We're seeing Mondani in New York City. The mayor of New York City's talked about. Toronto is doing it. They've passed some whatever that it means. Now, on the one hand, I kind of wish they'd just go ahead and do it, because then they'll figure out you're not selling anything for 40% discount. Good luck trying to.
It's impossible.
It's we call that a food bank because there's no way. You need donated products. So in some ways, I think the best thing that could happen for the industry, both not from a Schadenfreude perspective, but from hey, you'll understand it's better if you try to do our job too. Now, you made some other great points. One of the great points you made, and I'd love you to talk more about it, is at least somebody political is talking about food affordability and putting it in the front window in this country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's important to recognize that, and of course, every party will have different solutions. But obviously, launching a grocery chain is hard work, and you need a lot of money. You need a lot of capital, and that would come from taxpayers. So I'm not entirely convinced that it is possible. And of course, promising that families can actually save 40%. I mean, if you promise that, it means that you get all your goods for free, essentially, because if you understand the costing to run a grocery chain, you really need that space financially. So it's going to be difficult. But my concern is, well, okay, government wants to help, fine, but do you really want to offer another option or replace what's already there? Because with what Mr. Lewis is proposing, of course, you may argue, well, he's looking at a different, like a two-tier food bank system, or he's looking at launching a grocery store chain. But why not looking at other governance structure? I mean, we already have co-ops in Canada, and co-ops are, you know, if you want to socialize the system, why not go with co-ops and allow people to become members and participate in food distribution in some other way? It is extremely difficult. I believe there's probably over 160 co-op stores, grocery stores in Canada. They're all struggling, to be honest. It's not an easy thing to be in the grocery business in Canada, but I would say that it's probably a better way to do it is to actually encourage groups to look into establishing co-ops. It would be much less costly for the government, and there's all sorts of resources you can actually use. FCC, there's BDC as well for capital support. And there's also different groups, association that can actually provide some expertise in how to run a cooperative in the first place. So again, I don't think it's needed in Canada. I don't think it's the right solution. But I'm thinking about food deserts, for example. And we know that theft and crime are big, big problems. And perhaps there is some merit to seeing governments or the government looking into establishing stores in specific food deserts where food affordability is a bit of an issue.
Some people would say, well, Sylvain, or well, not Sylvain, but well, if we look at an adjacent industry, the liquor industry, in many, many provinces, including in Nova Scotia, where you live, and here in Ontario, it is government run, and it's been government run for a long time. So why can't that model work for groceries?
Well, first of all, it's alcohol, one thing, and so there are some social responsibilities that are attached to selling alcohol. That's one thing, and I think that most Canadians actually would appreciate that. I mean, selling groceries is a lot of work, and of course you're looking at many SKUs. I mean, thousands and thousands of SKUs, and I've argued with Toronto, for example, or even at the federal level, if you really want to make things work, you may want to look at 1,500 SKUs and make those SKUs work as much as possible, and work the supply chain very differently. Similar to what we see with liquidation centers or small independents that are actually rescuing food up the food chain to offer good deals to folks. But I mean, you can't really offer discounts at the level that they're proposing at 40%. It's just impossible to do.
We could do any kind of mental gymnastics about how they may or may not get there, including like waiving city taxes, free space. But of course, if you gave that to the grocers, they would do the same thing with it. So there's lots of arguments. But I mean, I do appreciate the fact we're talking about it. And
no, absolutely. 10, 15 years ago, I would thought, I think at one time, one of my students actually said to me, why don't we nationalize food distribution in Canada? And I laughed. I mean,
why don't we nationalize airlines and trains? And we went through our period of crown corporations. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's move on from that. I'm sure lots of headlines to be had as Avi Lewis starts to position the NDP and figure out where he wants to stand on various issues. Let's talk about the big CPG purchase last week. We talked about it as a rumor last episode. McCormick has indeed bought Unilever Foods Brands, creating a $65 billion food giant. So there's probably some benefits to scale. I guess that's Hellmann's mayonnaise and a bunch of other things within that join McCormick to be one big company. What are your thoughts on the merger and any considerations? Is it good for consumers, bad for consumers, neutral? What do you think?
Yeah, so when it was announced, I wasn't surprised because everyone knew there were so many rumors out there, and it's a big deal in the food industry. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of deals at $44 billion. It's pretty rare. I mean, it's a massive deal. It makes sense for CPGs to unite because it's hard for them right now. It's I mean, there's we are expecting more consolidation, and that's why I think Kraft Heinz kind of said, okay, maybe a divorce is not the right time because big is actually better to fight the headwinds that the sector is facing, like the GLP-1s and consumers looking for, genuine products, the white labeling, all of the things that national brands have to deal with. I mean, it's harder to actually deal with if you're smaller. So it makes sense. Unilever is a global company, has developed a global brand globally, whereas McCormick is more focused on the United States, food service as well, not much retail. I think from looking at synergies, the deal absolutely makes sense. It does. As far as I'm concerned, anyways, I do think it's actually a marriage made in heaven. However, I'm concerned about, of course, for grocers, it's one less option. That's one thing, and two, of course, you have the consumer. It's not good news for consumers. You're likely going to see one less player and less competition, and when that happens, that typically means higher prices.
Well, these big food mergers, if you go back 20, 30, 40 years, even back to the Nabisco days, they have a very sketchy history of actually working. I mean, they're broken up as often as they are when they come together. And, in terms of consumer choice, I mean, if I pick on Hellmann's mayonnaise, there's lots of other mayonnaise available on the market. And so I'm not sure how much choice, how much impact on choice. I mean, I remember I was thinking back to when the pizza guys exited frozen pizza. Well, there's lots of frozen pizza on the shelf today. So I think there's lots of food innovators. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's lots of food innovators, Dr. Oak or whoever.
Oh, there's always going to be a void, to be honest. But I think there's some appetite for change, and frankly, there's so much bad press around ultra processed foods. Whatever that means, and that term
Marmite.
is often
I didn't know the McCormick guys make Marmite, so that's a hard one to replace. You ever had Marmite? The Australian little delicacy?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. It's okay.
It's
okay.
Not so great. Sticking with M&A, we've got Cisco buying the Restaurant Depot, which is a huge I think they paid $29 billion for it. 94-year-old guy, reclusive guy. I've been into one of these things. They're fantastic. It's interesting that Cisco's getting into this. You know where I went today? I went into Costco's business center. They opened one. Have you been to one of these business centers that they have?
No,
it's a fascinating place to go I think this is what Cisco's doing to kind of price fight or fight against it, because they're probably losing some wholesale trade to the restaurants. So I went there today. There's one in Mississauga near not too far from me. I'd never been. You use your same membership card to get in. And I found, instead of just the regular shopping carts, there's these huge pallet carts. I saw it was a mix of people who were clearly restaurant owners because of stacked high on their cart, and people like me who were just like dazed walking around and looking at all the stuff that was in restaurant-sized portions. The most interesting feature, if you ever get a chance to go in, is the chilled area is about half the size of the building. So instead of having refrigerator units, they have some. It's in one giant chilled area. So you got to put your coat on, dress warm. And, I picked up a few things, but you're tempted, right? Boy, that's a good deal on 5 pounds of 5 pounds of bacon or 5 pounds of pepper. But what do you make of this? I think to me, it's Cisco fighting back or positioning themselves against Costco because they're in that. I go to a cash and carry for some of my stuff called A1, which is more ethnic, more Indian. What do you think of all this?
Well, I mean, with cash and carry, Cisco was not there. Now with this acquisition, they're acquiring way more business, and the cash and carry business is quite important. So I actually agree with you. They actually are positioning themselves as an alternative to Costco, essentially, and which is interesting because, I mean, Cisco has to figure out ways to support more restaurants, and because the restaurant business is growing but not as fast as it used to, so it needs growth. And I actually saw the CEO doing an interview about this deal, and it made a whole lot of sense to me, to be honest. And what the one comment he said to me was really important is that in the cash and carry world, you tend to have more loyal customers. They will come back and they will actually stay open for a very long time. And whereas a lot of companies actually will open up an account with Cisco and they'll disappear a few years later, basically. And so the cash and carry, and so to me, it was very much about loyalty and have access to more companies that you expect them to stick around.
Well, I almost bought a $67 massive salad spinner, which was about the size of my head.
$67.
Well, it's a big restaurant size thing. Like there's just restaurant size equipment there. For anybody who hasn't, gone to a restaurant supply place just to see the stuff that restaurants buy, I'd encourage you to if you're a Costco member, take a walk through. It's just really fascinating. And you'll see some very familiar stuff and some new stuff. And I think it'll be interesting because Costco is expanding this concept for sure. They're going up against A1, which is also growing here in my parts of the world, which tends to service more the Indian community. And so their products are more oriented to that community. So anyway, it's very interesting. I think Cisco's the net loser and all that because they just lose another traditional distributor. So anyway, go try it. Check it out for yourself.
Absolutely.
All right, let's take a break. Let's get to our great interview, Jamie Nelson, who talks about many of these issues actually in our interview. And then we'll be back to talk about something going on in your neck of the woods regarding whiskey.
All right. Jamie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So a lot of people in the food industry will know who you are, but a lot of our listeners will not know who you are. So tell us more about yourself, your career. How did you get to become part of the Pattison Group?
Well, back in 1979, when I was in high school, a new overweighty store opened up in the small town of Mission, BC, which is about 45 miles outside of Vancouver. And I went down and applied for a job and got the opportunity to work in the old store for a little bit and then transitioned into the new store.
And you never left the Pattison Group since?
No, after I graduated, that was 1981, and the economy, you guys are a lot younger than I am, but it was pretty tough back then. There wasn't much going on, and I got offered an opportunity for a full-time job if I transferred. At that time, we used to call it the overweighty tour, and if you took moves into the interior BC, you get lots of different opportunities. So I spent the next few years in a number of small towns, learning a lot about the province that I'd been born and raised in, but it was great to get out of the Lower Mainland. And then I was very fortunate to be one of the first individuals on the ground in Alberta, in Edmonton, in 1990, when we opened the very first Sylvain food store in Edmonton, or in Alberta at that time. And that gave me a real opportunity. We were kind of on a bit of an island out there by ourselves to learn and figure things out. I spent the next 12 years in Alberta before coming back to British Columbia as a regional director, moved my way to the office in merchandising. And when Daryl became president in 2012, he gave me the opportunity to take over his role as vice president of operations. Of course, at that time, it was just Sylvain Foods. Since then, we've been, since 2021, we've been the Pattison Food Group. And upon Daryl's retirement, about, 15 months ago, I got the opportunity to run the company.
That's great. So congratulations. And so tell us more about the Pattison Food Group. How big is it? How many stores do you have? How many employees? And tell us more about the company.
Well, we're sitting at just under 30,000 employees.
Wow.
We have 308 or 9 retail locations at this time. Majority of them being Sylvain Foods, where there's 187 stores from, Victoria to Whitehorse to Winnipeg. We operate under 11 different retail banners. We have a drug distribution company called Imperial Distribution that services all our Sylvain Foods pharmacies, as well as about 45 independent pharmacies that we have. We have some manufacturing, we have a bakery, we have a cut fruit plant, we have a couple meat plants, we have 6 wine stores, a number of different distribution centers. Yeah, we got lots going on.
I mean, you're a grocer, you're in food retail, and we know that grocers are scrutinized from time to time these days. How do you see the grocery business in general in Canada, and in particular where you are out west?
Yeah, well, grocery's definitely going through its challenges these days, and as you guys well know, there's lots of opportunity, I think, for education in our world when it comes to what grocers actually do and what goes into the cost of goods and everything else. Lots of competition. The market, when you look at it consumption-wise, is relatively flat, but there's lots of square footage being added right across the country. So, when you just do the math on those numbers, that can make it very challenging right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, right now, often what we hear about the grocery business or food retail, it's price, food prices, food inflation. The focus seems to be just on that, but I feel sometimes we miss an opportunity to educate the public in terms of how complicated the grocery business is. So what are some of the things that you think Canadians don't understand well about the grocery business in Canada?
Well, it's the input costs that, and how they are made up. And especially, for us in the West, it's for everybody in Canada, but, the 80% of our products coming from Eastern Canada or, on the fresh side, the produce is all coming from Mexico or California. And you just have to look at the price of diesel and where it's at. It continues to go up and all the costs involved in that, and then I look at locally, taxes, rent, security costs, all those pieces that have come into play, assessment values of property that have driven taxes up. It all comes back into the cost, and minimum wage, increases, labor agreements. It all comes back to that end of it. And I think grocers overall do a really, really good job of doing the best they can to keep their costs down. But it's challenging. It's, we're probably the biggest mid-sized guy. But when I look at a lot of the independent grocers, I've been a big member of the Canadian Federation of Independent Grocers. I've been chair of the board, just passed that off a couple of years ago. It's very difficult for the small grocer with all those costs coming in to, even if they can pass the cost on to the consumer, it makes it challenging.
Let's shift gears a bit, Jamie. Let's talk about the consumer. So you've been watching consumer behavior your entire career, right from the front lines into the executive chair. And I want to get your sense of it, some tactical stuff that's going on. I just got back from a conference in Las Vegas, and of course AI is a big discussion, and in many contexts now it's moving to how consumers discover things versus the pragmatic how to make things more efficient in retailers. So what's your observation? Are consumers today, are they trading down? Are they buying fewer items? Are they looking for different quality? Are they shopping different? Is your AUR better than it used to be? More just give me a sense of what you're seeing that you think is different as you and the merchants think about how to merchandise the store.
Well, I think, for a lot of years, and it still continues to somewhat, grocery was a lot about convenience. Your neighborhood store that was close to where you went to work, where your kids went to school, where you lived, and you zipped in and out, and you basically, purchased what you were given or what they had. I think the consumer of the future is really starting to take more control. It's our job as grocers to fulfill a demand And we sometimes like to tell the consumer what they can purchase and what they can't purchase by what we put on our shelves. But I think the consumer's looking for more than that. They're looking to take control of that. And we're going to have to be sharper and smarter to make sure we have the products the customer wants. The challenge is they don't always know exactly what they want.
Right.
And that's where the merchandising comes into play.
Yeah.
I really think there's a drive for, you know, cleaner ingredients and more unique products where, you know, where people understand their origin and everything else. And it's funny because we talk about the consumer not being educated, but then there's a lot of things that they are really educated on and engaged in at this time.
Yeah, it's a super paradox, right? Super sharp idea about price, but maybe not so much how the business kind of math all fits or stitches together, right?
And I think that's where the value comes into play, because it's not necessarily the price, it's whether the product at that price is giving the value that you're looking for.
Right.
And if you have the right product that the consumer wants, and the price is in the right play, they're happy with that.
Are your merchants seeing enough innovation from the vendors? I mean, we're at Cial, this big innovation show in a couple of weeks. You and I have been on a stage at Cial in the past, and it's all about food innovation. Sometimes it goes a little too far, gets a little far ahead of their skis. But how are your merchants feeling?
Yeah, I don't think. Well, it's challenging. Like, it's easy for me to say there's not enough, but then I understand from a consumer packaged good perspective how difficult it is and how much money it costs and how you need to plan for that moving forward. But the consumer's demanding more innovation, and you look at some of the traditional categories. I look at the cereal aisle, for instance. Okay, cereals had its challenges. It declines in a lot of areas. But at the same time, you walk into most grocery stores, we got 90 feet of it.
True.
So and we're trying to come up with a new flavored whatever. I don't want to name brand kind of deal. But there's not some real true innovation there, and I think that that innovation needs to come forward in order for you to drive your business. If you don't have it, you're not going to get that consumer coming in.
So it's been about a year, maybe a year and change, since this whole Buy Canadian movement got energy under its wings. Are you still? We're hearing in the market, it's still of interest to consumers, but for sure the kind of value price, probably always trumped it, so to speak. But what are you seeing on your shelves? Great Canadian company. Are you seeing demand steady, increasing for brands that are Canadian or made in Canada?
Yeah, we continue to see consumer awareness. They want to know if it is Canadian and where it's coming from, and then they'll make their decision based on that. In the early days, it was just, I'm only buying Canadian, just give me everything Canadian. Now they're looking at it and understanding, is that the value, is that worth it for me wherever I sit economically? But I definitely think there's a shift here in the West in controlling our own destiny a little bit more. And I think it has been good in the sense of, I don't think people realize how much of our fresh produce comes from California.
Yeah.
And we need to produce more. We need to manufacture more, and we need to sell more. But we're very, very dependent on other countries when it comes to fresh fruits and vegetables.
Shifting gear again, and then I'll pass the mic back to Sylvain. Let's talk about your private label. So your private label, Western Family, has been growing. What private labels have always had an important role. Do they have a greater role today than they did before? Are you able to express innovation as you think about your what's driving you and the team to create great products under that label?
Yeah, it's very, very important to our overall strategy, once again, to control our own destiny. But some of the same challenges that big CPG has, we have when it comes to developing private label and finding somebody to produce product for us. Over the last 10 years, but there's been lots of consolidation in the private label business, and you're limited to your opportunity on the end of a run and, how much you can actually buy and purchase. But when it comes to differentiating ourselves, Western Family is a huge opportunity for us. We also recently just launched a line over the last 18 months called Only Goodness, which is a natural organic health and wellness line. We got about 500 SKUs now that we continue to grow out. And it's given us a real opportunity to be, to differentiate ourselves with clean ingredients to a consumer that is already looking for that, a consumer we already have. It's done very well for us.
So we're seeing a lot of growth in organic, I suppose?
Absolutely, but then it falls back into the price at the same time, and the consumer. But there is a consumer that is tight for money, but they want only organic. We have a chain of stores called Nature's Fair, natural organic store, that are doing very, very well for us.
You've been with the company for a very, very long time. You understand supply chains more than anyone. What are some of the lessons learned that you've experienced in recent years with COVID, with inflation, and now, of course, with energy costs generated by attacks in Iran? So how do you actually deal with supply chains? And you just mentioned that you're supporting 500 SKUs of organic products. I mean, that's complicated right there. So what are some of the things that you've learned the last few years that are really complicated when it comes to running food supply chains?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Sylvain. I remember when I started, you just expected the truck to be there on exactly the time that you expected it to be, and that it had all the products on it that you exactly ordered it. Now with the fact that we have to forecast. If we don't forecast properly, we won't get the product that we ordered 3 months ago. It is very, very complicated, and it's a big piece of the business. But I think overall, when you look at the big grocers in Canada, they've done a really, really good job of keeping our costs down with improved supply chain over the last 20 years. But it just continues to be a battle and a challenge, and you got to look at systems and automation and distribution schedules and all those pieces. And it's almost like managing a store. It used to be like you just put a plan together and then you just worked it. It's managing that daily, and then you throw in rail strikes and fires and floods, and the supply chain is the biggest piece of our business. We've invested heavily in a lot of areas to make sure we're getting the product to the right place. And even we have a large wholesale business. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, Associated Grocers. We're servicing, 2,500 independents across Western Canada. And in a lot of cases, those little stores are the only stores in these towns. And if we can't get them groceries, there's a food security problem there right off the bat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pretty critical. And you guys have had your fair share of major natural disasters in recent years with wildfires and everything else, for sure. Going back to the AI issue, of course, we're talking about supply chains. We're talking about managing stores. What's your position as CEO in terms of the use of AI in general when you look at supply chains and how your stores are managed right now?
Well, I'm very open-minded, but I'm very cautious. And if I had $1 for the amount of every email I got every day about somebody that can solve all my problems with a new AI tool, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys. I'll tell you that much. But it's because it can be very, very expensive, and the devil's in the details in a lot of cases. We like to wade into things conservatively. I think it's the nature of our ownership and everything else. And look for where the opportunities lie. We're not going to be the first guy, and we're not going to be the last guy. We have to weigh it very carefully, because if you don't, it'll actually could increase your costs in a lot of situations, or increase your investment up front. We're measured heavily on return on invested capital, so you have to make sure that you're getting the bang for your buck.
AI
is coming.
When I was at Hudson's Bay, we used to say about technology, we wanted to be a fast follower. We didn't, like you said, we didn't want to be first, didn't want to be last. Can we spend just another minute on AI? And again, coming out of this conference, everybody's talking about how consumers are using it. So they're moving pretty fast, like 50-70% of consumers suddenly are now using AI to discover. Are you and the marketing team thinking about that, and how and what role you can play, and how people discover all the great products that you're offering?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's become a, remember when Google first came out? We thought that was so great. Well, now it's Google on steroids by times 100, and people are getting all the information they need. You want a recipe, so they're not, our digital team for years has done a great job of giving recipes. Yeah, I think we're moving away from that a little bit because the consumer doesn't even want to take the time to read the recipe. They're just punching it in. Give me a recipe for this or give me that, and using it quickly. And how we tie ourselves into that from, through whether it be our e-commerce or whatever it is, we're working through that and have some great thoughts and ideas moving forward on that.
Last couple of questions. So you've been in the chair now about a year, and certainly as an operator, you would be, as you said off the top, experiencing various levels of government programs, interventions, municipal, provincial, federal. If there's I don't know, if I gave you a magic wand or I gave you a bullhorn and you could say, listen, government, if you really want to improve food affordability to help us, help you, and help Canadians, any ideas? What would you ask? What would you lift up? What would you say? Listen, just do these things, and it's going to help everybody.
Well, I think they need to, because it's not one thing. They really need to take the time to look at all those things that are driving costs up. And right down to the speed to build a new store. The construction's costs, I just had an example, we're building a new store in a small town and we wanted to use all the local people we could. But the costs are way higher than bringing somebody in from out of town and keeping them overnight. So how do you want to do the right thing for the community, but you got to justify it to get the costs done. And why do things like that happen? And I don't think anybody in government really, and maybe they do, they don't take the time to really understand what are all those costs, because it's not one thing. We can point, yeah, sure, gas prices are high, but I don't see a future where gas prices are going to be a whole bunch lower ever anyway. So what are all those pieces involved in there, and what can they do about it to help the average consumer out?
Well, let's cast our mind forward. Let's say 5 years feels like a long time these days. But if you and I, the three of us, were together standing in one of your stores at Sylvain, what would it look like? What would be different? And what do you think? What do you think the future holds for the sector and for Pattison Food Group?
Well, I think the most important thing as an operator is you have to run good grocery stores. You have to make sure that you have the quality products in stock that the consumer's looking for at that time. Because if you don't, they got lots of choices, and they're just going to move somewhere else. So for us, it's that complete value equation of quality service, great promotions that give the overall value, and the convenience of it. And convenience runs right down to, what does your parking lot look like? At the same time, there's a large e-commerce component that I don't think is going to be, right now in Canada, it's sitting around 5%, 6% grocery e-commerce. I don't necessarily see that being 15% in the near future. It might be one day. So it goes back to the fact that I believe people are social beings. They want to get out to their local grocery store. They want to talk to people. They want to see people, but they're tight for time. So I think it goes back to understanding that consumer and making sure you're delivering in your community or in every community on what their needs are.
A couple of quick follow-ups. Yeah. And any appetite for this discussion around retail media? I talked to some big grocers in the States particularly, and they say, listen, it's really helping the margins. We're capturing some incremental dollars that aren't co-op dollars. They're dollars that we're taking from the platforms, and they're spending them with us, and we're right beside the consumer, so everybody's winning. So any appetite for that in the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of our key initiatives. We see an opportunity there, but we have to make sure that it's a good opportunity for everybody involved. There's lots of different opinions on it, and ensuring that the investment that comes from it is not investment that's being taken from other areas, and that the CPG companies are getting what they need out of it too. Because I've talked to a few of them that aren't as bullish on it as they were maybe 3-4 years ago, that it's actually really determining the value. And once again, it goes back to what is the consumer looking for? Yeah. If we fill our stores with a whole bunch of screens that have, national CPG ads on them, is that really what the consumer wants in the store? Or, is it more subtle, digital, retail media through the background and stuff? there's lots of questions.
It's a great debate and great discussion about the relevancy of the media, right? Like everything else, is if it's a relevant ad and a relative aisle for relative product at the right time, then it's probably a pretty good thing for consumers. But that it's kind of like, that sounds pretty hard to actually execute. So I think that gets to the nub of the issue. Yeah.
And you're right, Michael, and you can't let somebody throw money at it so that you put up an ad that's not relevant to the consumer, but you got some money for it.
Yeah.
That really defeats what you're trying to do.
Yeah, you wind up with a bunch of F-150 ads in the soup aisle or something like that.
Yeah.
Jamie, listen, this has been a real treat. It's so great to talk to you, and I'm glad we get to lift up the size and scope and what you're doing at the Pattison Food Group, because I think it's a story that continues to be well told. You got such experience, and listen, congratulations on all the success for you and the team. And
absolutely.
On behalf of Sylvain, I wish you much continued success, and look forward to seeing you soon. And thanks again for joining us on the Food Professor podcast.
Well, thank you, and great talking to you, fellas. You do a lot of great work for the industry, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
All right, we are back. So I don't know if you saw in the paper today, I don't know if it's the buzz in the city, but Alberta is moving to create a protected term, Alberta whiskey. So protected term. I mean, we've talked about this. Somebody's trying to do with poutine, and of course the Italians and the French, and everybody does this, like champagne, for example. Yeah. So I guess the idea is it would have to be made in the province, and would have to be made using the ingredients from the province. And there's a whole bunch of other standards.
There are certain protocols you need to follow to call it Alberta whiskey. Yeah.
Now I like my whiskeys, so I'm looking forward to trying more Alberta whiskey. Now, we had someone from the whiskey category on literally weeks ago from Ontario.
Yep, that's right.
Which makes a delicious product. You think there's a there? You think there's a benefit to this for the great province of Alberta?
Listen, I'm actually going to talk about it during my talk this afternoon, because I am in Alberta, and I would say the more you do that, the more you push innovation. When you certify products like that, you don't necessarily add bureaucracy. It's more about recognizing that the market is looking for different things, and you're building a brand, you're building value. And it's not just about Alberta. I think it's more of a positioning, because of course you have many brands out there that are known, but this is about positioning it's by empowering a geography, basically, where it's made. And Quebec has actually done that for a very long time with corn, with veal, with all sorts of products. And I'm really happy that Alberta is doing this, because, again, people will look for Alberta whiskey eventually. And guess what? Many of them won't be in Alberta. It's about growing the market outside of Alberta as well. So I think it's a great initiative. The more you recognize how fragmented demand is, the more you allow for innovation to emerge.
One of the comments, there was an article in the Globe and Mail about it today. One of the comments that I thought was super interesting was that Alberta is a market where you can get U.S. product, and Kentucky bourbons and that have seen a lot of business because they think other people from other provinces are coming in. But one thing they did note is that the California wine business never recovered. So even though it's on the shelves, Canadians have moved on. And I think it gets to my point. I wonder if you would agree or have thoughts that people just, it's change of habit. That people, maybe they were picking up at that standard California cab, and then they tried some amazing BC wines or Ontario wines, or
it's
from
quite
wherever.
Possible.
And now they're like, hey, that's equal to or better, and now I got a new habit. Very hard to break, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I think it's great that we actually showcase some of our products, and the whole concept of terroir is very much part of that too. Looking at topography and geography to honor the ingredients, the know-how behind a certain product. And so, yeah, absolutely. And I hope that more provinces will do the same thing.
Well, that's a wrap on this show. Fast and Furious. You got a keynote to go deliver, and I got a dog to walk, so let's leave it there. I'm Michael LeBlanc, media entrepreneur, and you are?
And I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Safe travels, everyone.
Take care.